My ex-husband saw me begging for scraps on the coldest Christmas Eve of my life, but the truth of why I was there was a secret I'd fought to keep from him for years. In just 72 hours, my carefully constructed walls came crashing down, exposing my desperation to the only man I'd ever truly loved and lost. The biting New York wind held a lonely tune, and the thick, icy sleet turned the already oppressive night into a miserable, blurring haze. Hey everyone, this is a story submitted by a subscriber, Sarah. If you got a dramatic moment that changed your life and you want it told, drop a comment below and let us know. Maybe your story will be next. My name is Sarah Hayes, and I'm 32 years old. Just a few months ago, I would have told you I had it all together. A talented graphic designer living in the heart of Brooklyn, with a career I was proud of and a future that seemed bright. I loved the hustle of the city, the way the lights reflected off the skyscrapers at night, and the sense of possibility that hummed through every street. But life has a way of pulling the rug out from under you when you least expect it. And for me, it started with a layoff that shattered my world 6 months ago. I remember the day clearly. My manager called me into a sterile, white-walled office and delivered the news with a practiced, sympathetic tone that did little to soften the blow. The company was downsizing, and my position was eliminated. Just like that, the steady paycheck I relied on vanished, and with it, my sense of security. In the weeks that followed, I tried to stay positive. I updated my portfolio, sent out resumes, and networked like crazy. But what I couldn't tell anyone, what I kept buried deep inside, was that I was battling a chronic illness that made every day a struggle. It's a debilitating condition that leaves me exhausted and in pain, with flare-ups that can knock me out for days. Holding down a full-time job became impossible. The relentless deadlines and demanding clients only worsened my symptoms, but I had to keep it secret. Why? Because I was terrified. Terrified of being seen as weak, of losing opportunities, of people pitying me. So I put on a brave face, pretending everything was fine while inside I was crumbling. The financial strain hit hard and fast. My savings, which I'd carefully built over years, started to dwindle. At first, I told myself it was temporary. I'd find another job soon. But as months passed with no offers, the reality set in. I maxed out my credit cards just to pay rent and buy groceries, watching the interest pile up until it felt like a mountain I could never climb. The eviction notices began to arrive, first as gentle reminders, then as stern warnings taped to my door. Each one felt like a punch to the gut, a constant reminder of how close I was to losing everything. And through it all, there was my daughter, Lily. She's 6 years old, with bright eyes and a laugh that could light up the darkest room. She was my reason to keep going, my anchor in the storm. I vowed to protect her from the truth, to maintain a facade of stability so she wouldn't feel the fear that gnawed at me every day. I'd tell her stories about how Mommy was taking a break from work to spend more time with her, and we'd have little adventures in the park, pretending we were on a grand quest. But at night, after I tucked her into bed, I'd lie awake, my mind racing with numbers and deadlines, the weight of it all pressing down until I could barely breathe. Christmas Eve was supposed to be magical. Lily had been counting down the days, her excitement infectious. She left out cookies for Santa and a note asking for a new doll, her handwriting wobbly and sweet. But that morning, I opened the fridge and saw nothing but empty shelves. The milk was gone, the bread was stale, and the last apple had been eaten days ago. My heart sank. I checked my bank account, zero balance. My credit cards were declined. The reality hit me like a physical blow. I had no money for food, no way to give my daughter the Christmas she deserved. The facade I'd so carefully maintained began to crack, and I felt a wave of desperation wash over me. I thought about reaching out to friends, but pride held me back. I couldn't bear the shame of admitting how far I'd fallen. So, as the sun set and the temperature dropped, I made a decision that tore me apart. I bundled up in my oldest coat, kissed Lily goodbye while she slept, and slipped out into the cold night, heading to a local church soup kitchen I'd heard about. The wind bit through my layers, and the icy sleet stung my face, but worse was the hollow feeling in my chest. I kept my head down, avoiding eye contact, praying I wouldn't see anyone I knew. Every step felt like a betrayal of the person I used to be, the strong, independent woman who had it all together. But in that moment, with Lily's innocent faith in Santa echoing in my mind, I knew I had no choice. My pride had to take a back seat to survival, and that night, I learned just how far a mother's love can push her. The line for the soup kitchen stretched longer than I had imagined, a sad, shuffling queue of shadows against the glittering backdrop of a city preparing for Christmas. I kept my head bowed low, the fur-lined hood of my coat pulled tight around my face, hoping it would hide me from the world and from myself. Each person in front of me was a story of loss, and now I was one of them. The icy sleet had turned to a persistent, freezing rain, and it soaked through my worn-out boots, making my toes numb. I clutched my stomach, not just from the cold, but from the gnawing hunger and a deeper, more profound shame. I was here, begging for a meal, while my daughter slept in our cold apartment, dreaming of Santa Claus. I repeated a silent mantra in my head. For Lily, this is for Lily. It was the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely, from turning around and running back into the lonely night. I could smell the faint, comforting aroma of hot food from the church doors, a cruel tease that seemed miles away. My mind drifted to Christmases past, to tables laden with food and laughter, to Ethan's smile across from me. I shoved the memory away. That life was gone. A sleek, black sedan, so out of place in this grim setting, pulled up to the curb beside the queue. It was a car that screamed money and power, with dark, impenetrable windows. I instinctively turned away, pulling my hood further down, my heart hammering against my ribs. Don't look, don't be seen. But then the window began to roll down with a soft, electric hum. I dared a glance, and my blood ran colder than the New York air. It was Ethan. My Ethan. Or rather, the man who used to be mine. Ethan Miller, at 35, looked even more successful than the last time I'd seen him, his face sharp and composed. But now it was shifting from casual curiosity to a slow, dawning recognition, and then to something else, a deep, icy shock that seemed to freeze his features in place. His eyes, the same eyes that had once looked at me with so much love, were now wide with disbelief and a flicker of anger. Time stopped. The sounds of the street, the wind, the distant sirens, the murmured conversations in the line, faded into a dull roar in my ears. I was trapped, exposed in the most humiliating moment of my life, by the one person I never wanted to see me like this. He didn't say my name at first. He just stared, his gaze piercing through my layers of protection, seeing right down to the raw, trembling core of me. I wanted the pavement to swallow me whole. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke, his voice low and controlled, but with a steel edge that cut through the cold. "Get in the car, Sarah." It wasn't a request, it was a command. I shook my head, a feeble, automatic refusal, my body trembling uncontrollably from the cold and the shock. "I can't," I whispered, but the words were lost in the wind. He leaned over, pushing the passenger door open. "Get in the car," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You clearly need help." I stood rooted to the spot, shame burning my cheeks. "Help!" The word felt like an insult. He continued, his eyes never leaving mine. "I'm offering you a clean, non-repayable loan, enough to cover all your bills for 6 months." My breath hitched. 6 months. That was a lifetime. That was stability. That was food for Lily and a roof over our heads. But then came the condition, delivered with a stony finality that made my stomach clench. Asterisk if asterisk you agree to one condition. You tell me the real reason you're out here tonight and let me spend Christmas Day with Lily. No lies, no excuses. The world tilted. Spend Christmas with Lily? After all this time. After I had kept them apart, the guilt was a physical weight on my chest. But the truth? I couldn't tell him the truth. That was the one thing I had vowed to keep buried. I found my voice, a shivering, broken thing. "Ethan, I can't. You don't understand the depth of this." I hugged myself, trying to hold my pieces together. He leaned closer, his face now just feet from mine, his eyes intense and burning with a frustration I hadn't seen in years. "I understand that the mother of my daughter is begging for food on the street," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh, pained whisper. "Tell me the truth, Sarah. What is the secret you're still hiding? What did you do with the settlement money?" "I won't ask again. The settlement money." He thought I'd squandered it. He had no idea that every penny had been swallowed by medical bills and futile treatments, by the silent, draining war I was fighting inside my own body. His accusation stung, but it was the pain in his eyes that undid me. This wasn't just about money for him, it was about betrayal. He thought I had chosen this, that I had thrown our life away for nothing. The sleet soaked into my clothes, and I felt the last of my resistance crumbling. The image of Lily's face, so full of hope and innocence, flashed before me. This wasn't about my pride anymore. This was about her. I looked at Ethan, at the man I had loved and left, and I saw not an enemy, but a lifeline, a complicated, angry, painful lifeline. With a shuddering breath that fogged in the icy air, I took a step toward the open car door. The warmth inside the car was a shock to my system, so abrupt and intense it felt like a physical assault. It stung my frozen skin, and the scent of leather and Ethan's familiar cologne, something subtle and expensive I could never forget, wrapped around me, a cruel parody of comfort. I kept my gaze fixed on the window, watching the blurred figures in the soup kitchen line continue their patient, shuffling wait. One of them was now my place empty. I had stepped out of that reality and into this gilded cage. Ethan didn't speak. He just drove, his hands tight on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The silence was heavier, more oppressive than the freezing rain outside. It was filled with all our unsaid words, with his judgment and my shame. I could feel the heat of his unanswered questions burning the side of my face. Every traffic light, every turn of the wheel, stretched into an eternity. I was hyper-aware of everything. The soft purr of the engine, the pristine cleanliness of the car's interior, a stark contrast to the grime and despair I had just left. My own reflection in the window was a ghost, pale, wide-eyed, and utterly broken. The image of Lily, tucked safely into her bed, believing with all her heart that Santa was on his way, flashed behind my eyes with painful clarity. I saw her little stockings hanging from the mantelpiece empty. I saw the cookie plate on the table bare. I remember the promise I had whispered to her just hours before, that tomorrow would be a magical day. That was the external pressure, the only thing that mattered. It was a vice around my heart, tightening with every breath. To protect her, to give her a future free from this cold fear, I would have walked through fire. Accepting Ethan's help, as humiliating as it was, felt like a smaller price to pay. But the cost was the truth. The internal debate began, a frantic, screaming argument in my head that drowned out the car's engine. Pride a voice, sharp and familiar, hissed at me. He'll see you as a failure, a sick, unstable burden. He'll look at you with that pity you've seen in doctors' offices, and it will be worse because it's him. What if he uses this against you? What if he decides you're an unfit mother and tries to take Lily away? You gave up everything to avoid this exact moment, to spare him this, to spare yourself his disappointment, But then, another voice, born of a deeper, more primal instinct, fought back. Necessity, this voice was quieter, but relentless. Look at yourself. You are begging for food. Lily is in a cold apartment with an empty fridge. Is your pride more important than her warmth? Than her full stomach? He doesn't need to know everything. You can give him a version of the truth. Tell him about the job loss, the money trouble. Keep the illness locked away. It's yours to keep. He offered a loan, not a diagnosis. You can take the money, save Lily, and figure out the rest later. You've survived this long on your own. You can survive his judgment. The two voices warred, tearing me apart from the inside. I felt like I was splitting in two. One part was still the woman he married, proud and fiercely independent. The other was a desperate animal, a mother backed into a corner, ready to do anything for her child. Ethan finally broke the silence, his voice low and strained. The money is the easy part, Sarah. The transfer can be done in minutes. But my condition stands. He didn't look at me. I need to know what brought you to that street. No more lies. His words were the final push. I thought of the eviction notice, probably sitting on my kitchen counter right now. I thought of the collection agencies that called daily. I thought of the look on Lily's face if we had to leave our home, the only home she'd ever known. My pride was a luxury I could no longer afford. It was a weight that was going to drown both me and my daughter. The mother in me won. The animal in me won. Taking a deep, ragged breath that felt like it was tearing my lungs, I ignored the sting of hot tears and the crushing weight of humiliation. I turned from the window and looked at his profile, at the man who was now my only hope. My voice, when it came, was a hollow whisper, stripped of all its defenses. The money! I need it! I saw his shoulders relax almost imperceptibly, but I pressed on, the words tasting like ash. But you won't like the truth. Let's go. It wasn't a surrender, it was a capitulation. I had just agreed to tear down the last fortress I had, to expose the wounded, fragile core of myself to the man I had spent years hiding it from. I had opened the car door and climbed into a different kind of cold, one that came from within. The car ride was a silent, tense journey through a city I no longer recognized. Ethan didn't speak, his focus entirely on the road, but the air between us was thick with unspoken accusations and a history that felt both distant and painfully immediate. We didn't drive to his familiar penthouse apartment with its panoramic views of the park. Instead, he navigated to a quieter, more exclusive street I'd never had a reason to visit before, pulling up in front of a stately brownstone that stood apart from its neighbors, not just in its grandeur, but in its aura of seclusion. It was beautiful in a severe, intimidating way, with a heavy, dark wooden door and windows that seemed to reflect no light from within. He used a key fob to disarm a security system I hadn't even noticed, a soft beep echoing as the locks disengaged. This wasn't a home. It felt like a vault, a secret kept from the world. He held the door open for me, and I stepped inside, my worn boots sinking into a plush, silent carpet. The air was still and cool, smelling faintly of lemon polish and something else, something sterile and unused. The entry hall opened into a vast living space, and I stopped taking it in. It was luxuriously appointed, yes, with classic, intimidatingly expensive antiques, a dark leather Chesterfield sofa, a grand piano that looked untouched, a marble fireplace that was cold and empty. But there was no life here. The art on the walls was minimal and cold, abstract pieces in shades of gray and blue that offered no comfort, only a sense of calculated isolation. Every surface was pristine, every object perfectly placed, as if curated for a museum rather than for living. The oppressive silence was broken only by the soft click of the door closing behind us, a sound that felt like a final seal. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. This place was meant to impress, but it only made me feel small, exposed, and utterly alone. Ethan gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing, too anxious to settle. My eyes were drawn to a large, mahogany desk in a corner office nook. It was then I noticed a small, exquisitely carved mahogany box sitting squarely in the center. It was old, the wood rich and dark, with a subtle sheen. As I glanced at it, Ethan moved with a sudden, fluid speed I remembered from our past, but now it felt defensive. He stepped between me and the desk, his body blocking my view, and casually, yet very deliberately, turned the box around so its lid faced away from me. He didn't say a word, but the gesture was screaming. "That is not for you." My heart, already racing, kicked up a notch. What was in that box? Documents. Something about me? Something about us. The mystery of it coiled in my stomach, a new layer of fear added to the existing humiliation. His phone buzzed, and he excused himself with a terse, "I need to take this. Make yourself comfortable." He walked into what looked like a study, closing the door behind him, but not entirely. I stood frozen in the center of that cold, beautiful room, my ears straining. His voice was a low murmur, but the silence of the house amplified it. I caught fragments, his tone urgent, insistent. "Confidentiality agreement is paramount. Yes, the timeline is accelerated now. I need those documents prepared by morning." My blood ran cold. Confidentiality agreement? A timeline? Was this about me? Was this some kind of legal maneuver? Was the loan a trap? My mind spiraled, imagining the worst, that he was documenting my downfall, building a case to take Lily from me. The generosity he'd shown in the car now felt like a snare, and this beautiful, sterile brownstone felt like a gilded prison. Driven by a fear that overrode any sense of propriety, I found myself drawn to the desk. The drawer he had been near when he took the call was slightly ajar, just a sliver of darkness. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of panic and curiosity. This was wrong. I knew it was wrong. But I was drowning in secrets, and I needed to know if one of them could save me. With a trembling hand, I pulled the drawer open. It was filled with neat, organized folders. But one was thicker than the others, and the tab caught my eye. Miller, Ethan Medical. My breath hitched. Why would he have a medical file here? Was he sick? A part of me felt a surge of concern, quickly overshadowed by a deeper, more terrifying intuition. I flipped the folder open. The top document was a report from a prestigious, world-renowned clinic. My eyes scanned the technical language, the medical jargon, until they landed on a diagnosis I knew intimately, a name that had haunted my every waking moment for years. It was a rare, complex, and expensive autoimmune disorder, the exact same one that had been slowly, silently destroying my life. The papers trembled in my hands. This was Ethan's file. But the symptoms, the prognosis, it was a mirror image of my own suffering. How? Why? The world tilted on its axis, and the cold, oppressive air of the brownstone seemed to rush into my lungs, stealing my breath. The secret I had fought so hard to keep was here, in this drawer, in a file with his name on it. The papers felt like ice in my hands, but they burned with a truth I couldn't comprehend. My own illness, the one I had hidden, the one that had stolen my career, my savings, my dignity, here it was diagnosed in his name. The world shrunk to the words on that page, the clinical terms that had dictated my suffering for years. How could Ethan have the same condition? He looked healthy, strong, successful. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. A cold dread, sharper than any I'd felt on the street, seized me. This was more than a coincidence. This was a puzzle, and I was terrified of the picture it would form. I heard his footsteps returning from the study. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stood there, holding the folder out like an accusation, my entire body trembling. He stopped in the doorway, his eyes going from my face to the papers in my hand. For a moment, his composed mask slipped, and I saw a flash of something, not anger, but a profound, weary sadness. "Sarah," he began, his voice cautious. "What is this, Ethan?" My voice was a raw scrape, barely audible. This is my life. This is what's been happening to me. Why is your name on it?" I thrust the folder toward him, the pages rustling like dead leaves. "Are you sick? Is that what this is? Some twisted sympathy because you're sick too?" He didn't take the papers. He just looked at me, his gaze steady, and in that moment I knew. The truth clicked into place with a devastating clarity. The private investigator he'd mentioned months ago, not to spy, but to monitor my well-being. The medical reports. They weren't his. "They're not mine, Sarah," he said softly, the words falling into the silent room like stones. "They're yours." The air left my lungs. I staggered back a step, my legs feeling weak. "Mine? How? Why?" He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "After you left," he said, his voice low and strained. "After you filed for divorce so suddenly, I couldn't understand it. You just shut down. You said you fell out of love, that it was over. But I didn't believe it. I couldn't. So I hired someone. Not to harass you, not to intrude, but just to make sure you were okay. To watch from a distance. I needed to know you and Lily were safe." He took a step closer, his eyes pleading with me to understand. The investigator found the medical bills, the clinic visits. He pieced it together. "I've known about your diagnosis for months, Sarah." The room spun. He knew. All this time he knew. The secret I had carried alone, the burden I thought was mine to bear, he had been carrying it too, in silence from afar. The weight of it crashed down on me, and the tears I had been fighting for so long finally broke free, streaming down my face in hot, silent rivers. "I left you," I choked out, the confession tearing from a place of deep, old pain. "Because I was sick. I knew I couldn't afford the treatments, not without drowning us both in debt. I didn't want you to watch me fade away, to see me become a ghost of the woman you married. I didn't want you to sacrifice your future, your dreams, for a lost cause. I was trying to protect you, Ethan. I was protecting you and Lily from the mess I was becoming." The words poured out. A floodgate opened after years of imprisonment. I hugged my arms around myself, sobbing, finally uttering the truth I had sworn I would never tell. But instead of the understanding I expected, I saw a different kind of pain flash across his face, a raw, gut-wrenching anger. "Protect us!" His voice cracked, rising for the first time. "You didn't protect us. Sarah, you punished us." He took another step, his eyes blazing with a hurt I had never seen before. "You chose to suffer alone. You let me believe you simply fell out of love, that what we had meant so little to you that you could just walk away. You let me think I had failed you, that I hadn't been enough. You destroyed our family with a secret I could have easily afforded to fix. Do you have any idea what that did to me? To wake up every day wondering what I did wrong. To miss my daughter, to miss you, and to have no reason why." His words were lashing, each one a strike against the wall I had built around my heart. "I have money, Sarah. I have resources. We could have fought this together, in sickness and in health. Did those vows mean nothing to you? Or did you think so little of me that you believed I would abandon you the moment things got hard?" The anger in his voice melted into a profound sorrow. "You took away my choice. You took away my right to stand by the woman I loved. You made me a spectator to your downfall, and that hurts more than any illness ever could. I was crumbling, his truth dismantling my own. All my noble reasons, my sacrifice, now seemed like a selfish, prideful act. I had been so focused on sparing him the burden of my sickness that I never considered the burden of my silence. I had inflicted a different kind of pain, one of rejection and confusion. I was scared," I whispered, my voice broken. "I was so scared of being a burden, of you looking at me with pity, of losing your respect." Ethan's shoulders slumped, the fight going out of him. He closed the distance between us, and for a long moment he just looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "Don't you see?" he said, his voice now soft, thick with emotion. "This wasn't about pity. That loan, finding you tonight, it wasn't about charity. It was about redemption. For both of us. I couldn't stand knowing you were suffering, and I was just living my life. I had to force the truth out. I had to prove to you that our vows didn't end with the divorce papers, that I still care, that I never stopped. This was my way of trying to heal the wound you left, the one that's been festering in both of us for years." He reached out, his hand hovering near mine, not touching but offering. "I just wanted to show you that you don't ever have to carry a burden like that alone. Not when I'm here. There's no escape." The thought echoed in the silence that settled between us after Ethan's confession. 4 years, my entire life had been a carefully constructed escape route, from the truth, from my illness, from him. But now, standing in this cold, beautiful prison he called a home, with the evidence of my own suffering laid bare in a folder with his name on it, I realized there was nowhere left to run. The only way out was through. Through the humiliation, through the fear, through the raw, unvarnished truth I had sworn I would take to my grave. He knew the diagnosis, but he didn't know the story. He didn't know the slow, grinding decay of the last 6 months. And he deserved to know. My daughter deserved for him to know. I sank onto the edge of the cold leather sofa, my body feeling both heavy and weightless. I looked at my hands, clenched in my lap, and then I began to speak. I told him everything. I started with the layoff, the polite, crushing meeting in the sterile office. I described the frantic job search that coincided with the worsening flares of my illness, the way potential employers' faces would change from interest to vague concern when I couldn't hide my fatigue. I confessed about the savings, watching the numbers dwindle to zero, the terrifying spiral of maxing out credit cards just to pay rent, the eviction notices that felt like death sentences. I described the hollow ache of hunger that had become a constant companion, and the deeper, more terrifying hunger of knowing my child might feel it too. I told him about tonight, about staring into the empty fridge, the final, crushing realization that I had nothing left, not even pride. I described the walk to the soup kitchen, the biting wind feeling like a punishment for my failure, the shame of taking my place in that line. The words poured out of me, a river of despair I had dammed up for far too long. I didn't look at him as I spoke. I just let the story spill, every detail a piece of my soul I was handing over to him. He listened. He didn't interrupt, he didn't scoff, he didn't offer empty platitudes. He just sat in a chair opposite me, his elbows on his knees, and he listened. When I finally fell silent, spent and empty, the room was filled only with the sound of my ragged breathing. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, he slowly stood up, walked over and sat beside me. He didn't try to hold me, but he placed his hand over my clenched ones, his warmth a startling contrast to my cold skin. "Sarah," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Look at me." I forced myself to meet his gaze. The anger was gone. The shock was gone. In its place was a profound, weary sadness, and something else, a determined clarity. "This ends tonight," he stated, not as a suggestion, but as a fact. "The fear, the scrambling, the hiding. It ends now." He stood, pulling out his phone. "I'm transferring the funds to your account immediately. But that's just the beginning." He made a call, his voice calm and authoritative. "Dr. Evans, it's Ethan Miller. I'm sorry for the hour. I need to book a comprehensive consultation and begin treatment protocols for that same condition we discussed. Yes, for Sarah Hayes. The first available appointment after the new year." He listened for a moment. "Money is no object. Just get her the best." He hung up and looked at me. "You're going to the best clinic in the country. We're going to fight this, properly this time. Together." The final confrontation wasn't an argument. It was a quiet, emotional reckoning. He led me down a hall to a spare bedroom. There, tucked under a thick duvet, was Lily, sleeping peacefully, her curls splayed across the pillow. We stood in the doorway, watching her, two ghosts from her past reunited in the present. "I failed you both," he whispered, his voice thick. I was so busy being hurt and angry that I didn't look closer. I didn't see the signs I should have seen. I shook my head, fresh tears welling. "No, Ethan. I didn't let you see. I was so afraid of being a burden that I became a different kind of one. I didn't trust you." We stood there in the dim light, admitting our failures to the silent, sleeping judge of our daughter. We weren't a couple, not anymore. But in that moment, we became something new, partners. Allies dedicated solely to the well-being of the little girl in that bed. Justice in this story wasn't about punishment. It was about an unexpected, miraculous reunion. The next morning, Christmas Day, was not spent in a cold apartment with an empty stocking. It was spent in the warm, if still unfamiliar, brownstone. Lily woke up to a tree suddenly adorned with lights and presents Ethan had somehow procured overnight. We had breakfast together, a real, hot, nourishing meal. We didn't talk about the illness or the money. We watched Lily tear open wrapping paper, her laughter filling the silent spaces of the house. It was awkward and fragile and heartbreakingly beautiful. We were a fractured family, but for one day, we were a family again. There were no grand promises of reconciliation, no spoken plans for the future. But as I watched him help Lily assemble a new toy, his head bent close to hers, a silent promise hung in the air, as tangible as the Christmas ornaments. It was a promise of a second chance, not necessarily at marriage, but at healing, at support, at shouldering the burden together. For the first time in years, I looked at the future and didn't see a dark, lonely road. I saw a path, and I wasn't walking it alone. The days that followed Christmas were a blur of quiet moments and slow, tentative steps toward a new normal. The overwhelming terror that had been my constant companion for months didn't vanish overnight, but it began to recede, like a tide pulling back from a shore it had battered for too long. Waking up in the spare room of Ethan's brownstone, for the first time, I didn't feel the immediate clutch of panic about how I would feed Lily or where we would live. The financial pressure was gone, replaced by a profound, almost unsettling sense of stability. But the real change wasn't in my bank account. It was happening inside me, a quiet revolution in my soul. I was transforming. The woman who had believed that strength was a solitary fortress, built high with walls of silence and pride, was slowly dismantling it, brick by painful brick. I was learning to find strength not in independence, but in vulnerability, in the terrifying, beautiful act of letting someone see the cracks in my foundation and trusting them not to let me collapse. It was on New Year's Eve, a few days after Christmas, that I found myself alone for a few hours. Ethan had taken Lily to the park, giving me some space. I decided to go for a walk, needing to feel the city air on my face without the desperate urgency of my last outing. I walked without a real destination, my hands buried in the pockets of my coat, the same coat I'd worn that night. My fingers brushed against a small, crumpled piece of paper. I pulled it out. It was the single, rag dollar bill. The last dollar I had to my name on Christmas Eve. I had kept it, a bitter token of my rock bottom, a reminder of the price of my pride. I stared at it, lying in my palm. It wasn't just money. It was a symbol of every fear, of eviction, of hunger, of failure. It represented the isolation I had imposed on myself, the belief that I was alone in this world, that no one could or would help me. Holding it now, in a world that felt suddenly full of possibility, felt wrong. It was a chain, and I needed to break it. I found myself walking toward the neighborhood church, the very one where the soup kitchen had been. It was daytime now, quiet and empty. The steps where I had stood in that miserable line were just steps again, innocent in the pale winter sun. I pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The air was still and warm, smelling of old wood and candle wax. Light streamed through stained glass windows, painting colors on the stone floor. It was peaceful. At the back, near the door, was a simple wooden box with a slot on top for donations. I walked toward it, the dollar bill clutched in my hand. This wasn't about giving money. I had so little to give. This was about giving up the fear. This was a ritual, a conscious release. I was taking the physical embodiment of my shame and my struggle, and I was letting it go. I was acknowledging that I didn't need to carry that specific terror anymore. I paused for a moment, feeling the weight of that small piece of paper, all it had represented. Then, with a deep, calm breath, I slipped it through the slot. I felt a lightness, an unclenching in my chest that I hadn't realized was there. It was a silent promise to myself to release the chains of financial fear and the self-imposed isolation that had nearly broken me. I was choosing to believe in a different future. That night, after Lily was asleep and Ethan was in his study, I sat by the window in my room, looking out at the city lights. I took out a small notebook and a pen. The words came easily, flowing from a place of hard-won peace. I wrote a note to myself, a reminder for the days when the old fears might try to whisper again. A few days later, as I recorded this story for all of you, I read those words back, a final voiceover to this chapter of my life. The biggest lie I ever told, my voice says, soft but clear, was the one I told myself, that I had to carry the burden alone. I thought I was being strong by hiding my pain, by shielding everyone from the mess I was in. But true strength isn't independence. It's knowing when to let the ones who love you carry the weight with you. It's understanding that vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's an invitation for connection, for help, for the love that can truly save you. I starved myself of that connection for so long, convinced my pride was a virtue. But pride can be a poison. Don't let your pride starve your soul. Let people in. Let them help. The weight of the world is too heavy for one pair of shoulders. My salvation didn't come from a loan or a doctor's appointment. It came from finally, allowing someone to see the real me, broken and scared, and discovering that in their eyes, I was still worthy of love and support. The words hang in the air, a final lesson learned in the coldest of winters, a warmth that I now carry forward into whatever comes next. This story, my story, proves that sometimes the hardest truths we bury deep inside are the very keys that unlock the greatest miracles in our lives. I lived for years convinced that my secret, my illness, was a burden I had to carry alone to protect the people I loved most. But in doing so, I built walls that kept out not only the pain but also the love and support that were always there, waiting for me. That cold Christmas Eve, when I hit rock bottom, forced me to confront the devastating cost of my silence. And when I finally found the courage to be honest, to let Ethan see the broken, terrified woman I had become, it didn't lead to judgment or pity as I had feared. Instead, it led to understanding, to healing, and to a second chance I never thought possible. Never, ever underestimate the transformative power of raw honesty, especially with those who have proven they genuinely care for you. Our vulnerabilities, when shared, don't always push people away. Sometimes, they build the strongest bridges back to one another. Now, I want to turn this over to you because every one of us has a story. What's the one secret you wish you had never kept? Is there a truth you're carrying that feels too heavy to share? Let us know in the comments below. Your confession could be the first step toward your own healing, and it might even inspire someone else to find their courage. If my journey from despair to hope, from isolation to connection, touched your heart in any way, please do me a favor. Hit that like button. It tells me that the story mattered, that it resonated with you. And if you know a friend who is struggling in silence, who needs a powerful reminder that it's okay to be vulnerable and ask for help, share this video with them. You never know how much it might mean to them. And finally, make sure to subscribe to my voice, your stories, and turn on notifications. We share real-life stories of redemption, love, and second chances every week, and we don't want you to miss a single one. Your own story could be next. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for watching, for listening, and for sharing this emotional journey with me. Your support means the world. Remember to cherish your loved ones, to put family first, and to never let pride stand in the way of the help and love you deserve. We'll see you in the next video.